Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be learning about a project called Snorkel AI. Snorkel AI is a few different things. It's a platform, it's a company, and it's a framework. We're going to dive into each one of these to better understand exactly what Snorkel AI is and how you can use it in your own projects, and also try to maybe understand some of the opportunities that exist in this problem space that Snorkel AI is going after. All right, so I really like this sentence here. It says, "The power of modern machine learning without the pains of hand labeling." This is what Snorkel AI is trying to address. What exactly does this mean? Well, in modern machine learning projects, most of the state-of-the-art machine learning models and approaches that exist are in a category of supervised machine learning. And in supervised machine learning, you have some input data, and you're trying to learn the mapping between this input data and some output data or some labels. And in order to produce these labels, you often need to go through the process of hand labeling this data. This can be very challenging because in some cases it requires expert knowledge. And what you're basically trying to do is you're trying to take this knowledge that these experts have and compact that knowledge representation into a model. And that model can then be used for performing inference on future examples of data. But in order to build this model, you need these hand labels. And this is a very difficult process, requires expert knowledge in some case. It requires training and paying humans to actually go in and label this data. And just because you have humans labeling the data, it doesn't even necessarily mean that the labels are correct. So it doesn't solve the problem of noisy data by having hand labeled data. You still have the problem of possibly having incorrect data in your data set. So this is the problem space that Snorkel AI is working on. They're trying to find better ways of getting these labels without requiring hand label data. And before we try to better understand exactly how Snorkel AI is achieving this, let's first take a look at their GitHub repo. So as I mentioned, Snorkel AI is a few different things, and one of those things is it is a framework. This framework is encapsulated in this GitHub repository. And this GitHub repo has 4.7 thousand stars, 764 forks, and 181 watches. This repository has done fairly well, but given the fact that it's been around for a few years, the growth is actually pretty slow. Let's take a look at one sentence in particular that I like here. The Snorkel project started at Stanford in 2015 with a simple technical bet. It would increasingly be the training data, not the models, algorithms, or infrastructure that decided whether a machine learning project succeeded or failed. And I think that this statement here has really shown to be true and has come to fruition in the last year or two. This is not the first place that I've heard of this data-centric approach to machine learning. In fact, it has become more popularized by Andrew Yang in the last year or two. So if we jump over to this slide deck that was produced by Andrew Yang, we can see his ideas for the life cycle of a machine learning project. And this first part is you define the scope. Then you're going to go out and collect data. You're going to train a model and then deploy that model into production. And notice how the flow of this machine learning lifecycle, it goes from left to right, but there are arrows that are going back to the previous steps. So this implies that machine learning is an iterative process. And I really like that the data collection is the first part, and both of the train model and deploy into production are pointing back to the collect data. What is not really put into this machine learning lifecycle is the model development. There is train model, which I guess in this step you could be doing things like tuning hyperparameters or possibly modifying the architecture. But the first part that is the emphasis of this life cycle is the data collection. And as you train the model and you see some result, then you want to go back and you want to think about the data. In this course by Andrew Yang, where he presented this slide deck, he gave some ideas of how to do error analysis. So after you've trained the model, maybe before you deploy it into production, you do some error analysis on the test data set. And based on this error analysis, you can see what examples of data the model is not performing well on. You can go back to the data collection and collect more data to improve the model performance. And I'm showing you this because Snorkel AI takes a very similar approach to iterative development of machine learning models with an emphasis on the data part of things. Finally, I also want to just show this slide here where Andrew Yang talks about a model-centric view versus a data-centric view. And in the model-centric view, you collect the data that you can, then you're going to develop a good enough model to deal with the noise in the data. And you hold the data fixed and you're going to iteratively improve the code/model. If you think about how one goes about learning machine learning, you usually are going to download some data set, like some well-prepared data set, and you're going to try to build a model that can predict your holdout data set, your holdout test data set from that data set in the best way. And this is a model-centric view. So like the way that we are learning machine learning in 2021 and even before that is really from this model-centric view. I believe that it's been just recently that we're kind of switching over to this data-centric view, that the models are good enough. The models that we have are good enough. And now we need to focus on what is called the data-centric view. And this is the consistency of the data is paramount. And we are going to use tools to improve the data quality. This will allow multiple models to do well. We hold the code fixed and iteratively improve the data. So this thing here where it says use tools to improve the data quality, Snorkel AI is one of those tools. Okay, so let's jump back over to the homepage here. Snorkel Flow. This is one of the products that they're building. I guess this is like the platform. So we have this framework of Snorkel, and they have put this framework into a web-based platform. And then down below, we can see the steps of this platform. The first part is to label and build. I guess you're like referring to building the data set, the training data set. So in Snorkel, your labels are generated with code. Your labels are generated programmatically, and you can have multiple labels per piece of input data. So you have some input data, and you're going to come up with a few different labeling functions to produce some potential labels for that data. This is what we are going to do first. We're going to write these functions. We are going to build our data set. Next, we are going to integrate and manage. So we are going to automatically clean up some of these labels. We've generated a few different potential labels. The idea with Snorkel is that all of these labels that we've produced are correlated to the true label. There's some underlying correlation between the labels that we've generated and the true label. So we're going to use models, predictive models, to try to tease out the true labels from these generated labels. And I like to think of this as like, we just want to we basically want to start with as much data as we possibly can. We can collect as much data, put as much data as you can into this pipeline here. And you are going to first write some label functions that are going to produce your labels. Then we are going to use predictive modeling to try to pull out what are the correct labels. Then we're going to go out and we're going to train our model on this data, like the actual classifier or whatever type of model it is that we want on the input and the labels. Then we can see how well this model is doing. And now to go, when we want to improve this model, we can go back and we could say, okay, maybe we need to modify our label functions. Maybe we need to add new label functions. Maybe we need to have better ways of pulling out the incorrect labels so we could improve the ways that we are cleaning these labels or integrating these labels. And this is the process for building our models with this approach. And as you can see here, it's very similar to what Andrew Yang described as a data-centric model approach and the life cycle of machine learning development. Okay, a couple other things that I want to point out to you. There is a section of the Snorkel team GitHub called Snorkel Tutorials, and in here you can see a bunch of different coding tutorials and examples, and we'll just take a quick look at one of these. I just went into the spam one. All right, so here's a Python notebook. It's a Snorkel intro tutorial for data labeling, and this tutorial is broken up into loading the data, writing the labeling functions, combining the labeling functions outputs with the label model, and then training a classifier. So these are the 4 steps essentially that we saw just a second ago. And in this example, we're doing spam detection. We want to determine if a comment is spam or not. All right, so this first part here is like, this is the shape of the data. This is what the input data is looking like that we're loading it from. I think all that we're going to be passing into our labeling functions is the text. And here are some examples of labeling functions. So these are fairly simple labeling functions, and this is the idea here, that we are just going to take a bunch of very simple labeling functions and try to tease out the true labels from a combined set of simple label functions. And all that we're doing here for working with this Snorkel library is we are just writing a typical Python function and decorating it with this labeling function decorator from the Snorkel package. Okay, and there are several other examples of labeling functions in this tutorial, but we're just going to keep moving along and go to how do we actually select what the correct labels are. And they give one example of a majority label voter approach to this, which it seems like what this would do would be you have a set of labels for a specific input data, and you're just going to take the majority of whatever label has been suggested a majority of times. We are going to take that label, and you could even do this with like a threshold. So if you produced 5 labels and one label was selected 3 of the 5 times, then you're going to take that one. Or you could do like 4 of the 5 times. So you could say like it has to be at least 80%, or you could say it has to be 100%. I have to have the same label 100% of the time from all of these labeling functions, and then this is going to be the label that I'm going to select. So there are a few different approaches to doing this, and I believe on the platform they have built-in labeling functions and also generative models to say which are the correct labels. So here, this is just using the open source repository, but on the actual Snorkel AI platform, it seems like they actually have like built-in functions for doing the label generation and the correct label selection. And finally, in this tutorial, we would then go ahead and train the classifier with the data set that we produced from our label production and selection process. Okay, and finally, I just want to say a few things about Snorkel AI, the company. They have raised 3 rounds of funding for a total of $50.3 million. And recently, they just raised their Series B of $35 million. So the seed round to get this project off the ground was around $3.3 million. And then they raised a Series A of $12 million. And just keep in mind that this project had already had quite a bit of development before raising this seed round, because it was being developed at the Stanford AI lab. So I think that this product was very, very much de-risked in terms of like the development side of things. And I wouldn't be surprised if they also had some paying customers at this point, because they started in 2015. So 2015 to 2020 is quite a long time. And maybe they also received some other smaller amounts of like angel investing or maybe even grants because they're researchers before this point. The other thing, they might have just gone directly to getting revenue from customers, from like a few small customers, and they worked on developing their product with just a few paying customers. All right, so my thoughts on Snorkel AI. I think this project is really interesting. I will definitely be using this at some point in the near future in my own machine learning projects. It totally makes sense to me. The entire framework and approach to developing models using the Snorkel AI, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I definitely also see that there's still room for using hand labeling. I think that you could do a combination of approaches. It might also just be that this Snorkel approach to developing models is superior and there's no need for even having the hand labeling, but it makes sense to me to combine the two approaches where you have some way of synthetically generating labels, and also possibly even synthetically generating the data if that's possible. So you have synthetic data generation, and the benefit of that is that you automatically get the labels. Then you can collect real world data, generate the labels automatically using the Snorkel flow approach, and then selecting the correct labels. You get some model that you can start to use, and you can start to see how it's doing. Then you use the results of this model, the error analysis of this model, to go back and improve your data, and you work on improving the data. For the most part, you hold the model fixed. Let the researchers figure out what the good models are. And right now, there are plenty of good machine learning models to use right out of the box. And I think what we need to focus on now is the data, taking a data-centric approach to machine learning development. All right, that's it for this video here today. If you like this content, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.